All right, so good night, everybody. If you
Good
can hear
night.
me, oh, you can hear me, Jody. Great.
Good
Good.
night.
Hi, good night, Makisha. All right, so you know me, I'm Dr. Harrison. Um, Tonight I'm tasked with having a session on a topic that I'm sure that you're familiar with. Not so sure, but I think most, if not all of you are familiar with this topic. So we're going to be looking at the social determinants of health and its impact. All right. So I'm showing my face now, but I'm gonna turn my video off because sometimes when my video is on at home, the bandwidth, I don't know, it gets a little bit shaky. So this is just to say that it's me I'm here, I'm the person here, and it's not a robot. So without further ado, let me close my video and start our lesson properly. All right, so thank you again for being here and being early. Let me see, there are 11 of us, including myself, in the room. So I think we probably have a quorum, so I'll start. In beginning, I want to say that when we enter this world, our fate, to some extent, rests on certain determinants of health. Yeah, let me see if I can get my thing going. Now, when we talk about determinants of health, what exactly are we talking about? Class, talk to me. You know this, so we're going to be having an interactive session. Am I talking to myself here?
No, Dr. Harrison. But
So,
some of the factors that influence somebody's health status, such as education, gender, community.
yes, those are some of them. And if you know, I have social determinants, but I'm so skeptical about the word social determinant because there's an important determinant that you haven't mentioned. You mentioned gender, which is socially constructed, but based on what? Based on our sex emanates our gender, right? We have different kinds of gender these days. Hmm? So we would want to say gender is socially determined. So yes, that's a social determinant. But what else? Kind of just put a little spin on everything where we can't say in totality that it's social determinants of health that really spawn health equity or inequity as the saying goes. What is that determinant I'm looking for?
The issue of access.
Hmm. Access would fall under those psychosocial determinants, or the social
Mhm.
determinants. What about genetics? Isn't that a determinant?
Oh, yeah.
Yes, that's the one I'm looking for. And remember that genetics. Many of you are medical doctors, and that's what? That's not social. So I like to just say determinants of health, eh? So yes, any factor that determine the health outcomes of any individual or whole communities, right? So of course, in this session, we'll be looking at some definitions. So we have already defined the social determinants of health or determinants of health. We're going to be looking at structural and intermediary determinants, and that's a figure or a diagram that I have that we're going to be discussing. The social gradient of health also, and we're going to be discussing some of the WHO's elements and suggestions where health equity and just trying to foster health equity is concerned. And of course, as I said, suggestions or recommendations right there. So as we said before, social determinants are anything that negatively or positively impact the health of whole communities, of a nation, of a population. So when we look at social and economic health, we're looking at what? Higher income and social status. But is higher income and social status necessarily linked to better health? Let's talk.
Well, Ms. Harrison, that would seem to be what the data is telling us, that people who enjoy a higher social status and better economic circumstances tend to do better than persons in positions of vulnerability. So
Tend
that
to
is what the
do.
data is telling us.
But
And I
I
suppose,
know. Go
hmm?
ahead. Go ahead. Who's
Sorry.
talking?
Oh, and because no, you're making it nuanced, and I'm kind of keen to see what you're gonna come back with. But I think where people have a little bit more money and social status, we find that they tend to are able to afford healthcare in certain spaces. You know, they don't have to maybe draw their bums on benches in the public health system in some instances, and they tap into the private space where the access is quicker and sometimes a bit more comprehensive, with the result that the results are better, the health outcomes are better.
Right.
Yeah,
Because they have the money that they're able to afford. They say affordability right there, affordability and accessibility. But
yes,
I am thinking, you talk about nuances, and I'm thinking, yes, that's correct. And when people do research, when they do study, it depends on the questions that they ask, who they ask and the kind of questions they ask, right? And so I guess predominantly and consistently, research might show that the higher income and social status are linked to better health. But from my observation, and I'm just speaking now anecdotally, I see also where higher income and social status lead a lot of the time to sedentary lifestyles, which spawn some of the very what lifestyle conditions that some poorer people don't have, or delayed. Those conditions are delayed where some persons of lesser means are concerned.
that is true. In the
Yes.
Jamaican context, sometimes they say you eat too rich, and therefore you have issues with obesity, you have the heart disease, you have the cancer cases, and there have been a couple of people or personalities in our society who we've heard about of late who have had certain types of illnesses that arguably could be related to just how well it is that they have lived.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think so too. Is it Reno? I'm trying to, while you're talking.
Yes.
Yes, right. So I honestly believe that to be so. Um, and I say all the time when we talk about poverty, we have to look at absolute poverty versus relative poverty. And yes, the research also shows, this is an aside now, wherein the studies show that people from the rural area have more poor people in the rural area. And I said, duh, because if the rural areas, you have a wider expanse of rural areas, you will have more people who are fall in the category of being poor. But health wise, are they less healthy? Because these people who do not have automated forms of transport, they have to walk. Yeah, they eat from what they produce. So and as I said before, here's my disclaimer, anecdotally here, I am thinking from my observation that some of these very persons seem to live healthier lifestyles. And even if some of those lifestyle conditions set in, it might set in, or they might set in at a later time than for those persons who might be, as you say, who eat rich. Some people. All right. So we're looking also at the physical environment. So we're talking about safe water, clean air, healthy workplaces. Let's talk about this one now. The physical environment and how it impacts one's health. So, would you say, for those of you who work in, well, let me not just limit it to who work in medical facilities, but where you work, would you say that your workplace is healthy?
I'd say no. Good evening, everyone. I'd
Hi,
say no.
Akeem.
I'd say no, yes, but there was a time I worked in certain places, specifically when I used to work at KPH, I
Oh
would
Lord, please
say,
don't call
and
anybody's any
no, but if
don't
if if
label
if
it.
if,
Don't
if
label it
we're if we're
Akeem.
gonna be if we're gonna be honest, we have to
Honest.
be honest. It's
That's
the
true.
truth. It is simply the truth. A lot is left. There's a lot to be done, and
Desired.
the
Mhm.
fact is, it's not the healthiest work environment for employees. And we're not just talking about lack of resources and workload, but the physical environment, like we said, the built environment, the space, the setting. There are lots of things that have to be addressed to really engender a healthy workspace and environment for employees.
That's true, Akeem. I agree with you 100%. Many of us, and I include myself, I don't think we work in environments that are conducive to good health.
And
Lots of
she
things.
didn't even mention the mold as yet, which
Oh,
is
Makisha, I never wanted to go there.
I wasn't going to go into the specifics, but the truth is the truth. There's a lot to be done.
There is a lot to be done. And what do we do? Because here it is, you are not just helping professionals, many of you in the medical fraternity, but you are public health practitioners in the making. What do you think you can do as public health practitioners to agitate for healthier physical environment in your own space? Let's talk. Silence.
No, I think you said it though, Doc. We need to agitate. We need to, send the letters, have the conversations with the different people who have the power or authority to make some kind of change. And I also think that we need to be a little bit reflective. Like, a lot of times if you're waiting on the establishment to make some adjustments, those adjustments will not come. And so to the extent that you can mobilize your colleagues, your team members to influence how your work environment is, I think that we should
Ah,
do that.
so Raynor, there you go. And when you talk about writing those letters, we have to understand that if you are the only person going to write that letter, you'll be like this lone voice in the wilderness. So when you do
Yes.
that petition, where you get persons and you form coalitions or alliances with other colleagues from maybe a different parish or a different facility who might be facing similar issues where physical environment and health is concerned, then know you have a voice. Then know there is that strength in numbers. And I like what you said earlier, just now, in terms of being proactive. Do something, because sometimes when you sit and wait, even if you have that petition, it might take a while for anything to be done, and just the red tape and the going around in circles sometimes. You start something because it's all about your health, eh? Yeah, I believe in that too. So we also have personal characteristics and behaviors. And these we know quite well, personal behavior, coping skills, how we eat, how active we are, or some of the vices that some people have in terms of, smoking, drinking. Some people might not think that they have a substance use disorder because it's just on the weekends that they binge drink. But that too is alcoholism, right? How we deal with life stresses and challenges all affect health, or nutrition, everything. The medical care that we get from you, or the medical care that we seek, or health seeking behaviors, are all determinants of health. So basically, as the heading says, anything that impacts one health negatively or positively, we know, you know, would be deemed a determinant of health. So here we go. Urbanization. urbanization being a strong influence on health equity. And here I have some information from the World Watch Institute, where they said that in 2007, for the first time, the majority of human beings living in urban settings was almost 1 billion. So 1 billion person living in slums. I am of the opinion that earlier I mentioned about absolute poverty and relative poverty. I'm of the opinion that abject poverty, pockets of, of abject poverty can be found in urban settings. What say you? I guess that's a truism, so nobody is answering. So access to quality housing and shelter and clean water and sanitation are human rights and basic needs for healthy living, according to UNESCO. What then, public health practitioners, do you make of some of our housing developments where you have persons in such close proximity? It might not be, they might not be slums, but let's put these developments under a microscope. I drive from home on the highway, the PJ Patterson Highway, and on my way into town on my left, usually I'm looking over at a fairly new, it's been there for a couple of years now, development, and I'm looking at some houses that are just so jam-packed against each other. What are some health implications here, you think, class? Let's talk. So overcrowding, I think, would be one. Yes? Now, when we are looking at health, remember that we are looking at not just physiological health. We are also looking at what? Psychological health. When people are in such close proximity, the houses are small, not many persons, and I think there are, they were fairly, I don't like to say cheap because nothing nowadays is cheap, fairly reasonable. I think when they were being sold for like $5 million. So, that's, just imagine what I'm talking about. Our summers are getting hotter. The concrete structures that close to each other. I'm asking you, let's talk. What kind of impact, health impact you think being so close to each other, very little vegetation in terms of trees and so on. What are some?
Increased risk of diseases such as respiratory illnesses would spread fast, or even higher asthma attacks if persons have asthma. Infections could spread fast as well.
I think so. Who was just talking a while ago?
I want to add, oh, go ahead.
Makisha.
Oh, Makisha. Yes, go ahead, Akeem.
Oh, I just wanted to add perhaps an indirect effect, but an eventuality is the fact that with all these concrete structures, the poor concurrent infrastructural development where roads are concerned, or at least the fact that these developments, residential developments, are significantly outpacing the development of drainage, the development of infrastructure, then flooding, I don't know if anyone has noticed in recent times, especially in the urban centers, has been worsening. And you have a lot more episodes of, as I've seen recently, severe flooding, consequential flooding. So that will have a major impact on the overall health and potential future health outcomes of all of us where the flooding is concerned, mosquito breeding sites, etc.
And flooding, effluent. I've been to some places in some urban areas that I'm afraid. I don't want it to rain because as it seems like it's gonna rain. I'm heading out of there because I think what happens sometimes, the carrying capacity of those drains. So I don't know. For the older, I think urban areas, especially some of the town centers, the current capacity, the number of businesses and how built up these areas have become, I am not sure that the infrastructure is moving as fast. It's keeping up with. Yeah. So I am no authority on the built environment, but yes, Akeem, I agree with you. And Makisha, yes, those highly communicable diseases, the risk. I am also thinking about the heat.
Yeah, I was just going to say that as we continue to have aging populations who are more susceptible to the heat in these concrete structures, as these persons begin to age, they're going to be more susceptible to heat stroke. And then you also have to consider children because they're selling these homes to families or they're marketing them to families rather. So, the children are also at more susceptible risk.
Mhm.
Then we think about environmental air quality in terms of
Yeah.
environmental health, the air quality, since persons will be spending more time
Oh,
indoors.
indoors or outside because I don't
I
think
would
you
say
can
indoors,
say.
but they don't have a lot of space outside to really play or have recreational activities or even to be in some of these areas where it's so built up. Most persons they just go to work, they come home, the kids can't go outside unattended to because there's just so many people around.
Or Alicia, maybe you should say they shouldn't go outside unattended to. Have you ever been through any inner city community and you see a lot of kids on the streets and a lot of people just hanging out on the streets? Now you know one of the reasons overcrowding, they don't have enough space inside. So you hang out on the street, you play your ball on the street, you do all of that.
I was thinking more of the community that you saw
Yeah, and I know.
along the highway, not necessarily.
Right. But you can envision though that before long, because children has a lot of energy that they want to expend it, and they're gonna find ways and means. If they sit around their device too long, they want to go outside to kick the ball. So they're gonna find ways and means. They'll just go on the road and do it to sometimes to their own detriment, eh?
Very true, very true.
Yes. So urban settings. And the reason I'm bringing up, we're having this conversation because you are leaders in your own right. These are some of the things you have to critically, think about what's going on, in just analyze these things under the lens, the public health lens. Because sometimes we see, and a cursory idea or thought, and that's just it. But we have to critically look at these things under the public health lens. All right. Thank you so much for your contribution. All right. Growing car dependence, land use, increased inconvenience of non-motorized modes of travel. Yeah. And so we talk about air quality, greenhouse gas emissions, and the big one, physical inactivity, the sedentary lifestyles. Hmm? And I think I fall victim to that one. So we walk nowhere anymore. You hardly see anybody riding bicycles. As a matter of fact, I have two bicycles just put down here. And just the very thought of me riding a bicycle is not funny, right? But this growing car dependence, what are some of the deterrents you think um to persons the physical activity? Now I know the Jamaica move is on, and you have these races, is it the 5K, is it the race you call them, or just these physical activities? But do you see anything else in our built environment, for example, that deter certain physical activity like riding bicycles and stuff like that?
Wassami has put one in the chat, Dr. Harrison,
Oh,
saying, the absence of bike lanes.
yes, that's what I was looking for.
Yeah.
Thank you, Blake. Yes, the absence of bike lanes, and how reckless and irresponsible some of the drivers are on the road. You need those lanes. As a matter of fact, how undisciplined we are. I can envision if barriers are not put up, they will some motorists will use those lanes for their cars, eh?
Sorry, one other thing
Yes,
also
Daniel, go ahead.
have to consider how it is that basically cars are getting bigger So that is also proving hazardous to persons who it is that might even want to consider a bicycle. So motor vehicle accidents are a lot more lethal now.
Yes. Mm.
Yeah, when it is that basically they do I want to say,
I
the
didn't.
is that would
Daniel,
be
go
in,
ahead. You're
yeah.
wobbly. I'm not hearing you very well. Repeat, please.
Uh, okay, so when it is that they do the assessments, the amount of persons it is that would basically have to be in front of your car
Mm-hmm.
before it is that you can see them. If it is that you're in like a regular sedan as opposed to like an SUV, it's
Right.
very different, right? So that is basically going to prove a lot more hazardous. Is a case where it is that cars don't have the same crumple zones that it is that they used to, because
Right.
everything is just kind of focusing on the rigidity of the vehicle, which is a bad thing because cars are supposed to crumple because that's how the force gets absorbed, which then
Mm.
that it is that that's why it is that when it is that somebody gets hit now is a case where it is that they actually die as a result. You
Oh,
mentioned
you
that.
just taught me something. I never looked at it like that, Danielle.
Yeah, it's that's why it's a big.
I just lost you in that last part right there. You faded in that last part there, Danielle, but I get the gist of what you're saying. That more the automobiles are supposed to
In the
crumble, but
sense.
they're not. Mm.
And yeah, and we can then go on to talk about the pressures that are exerted in terms of like overseas when it is that you have like the US complaining that they don't sell enough F-150s in like the UK when it is that their roads are literally just not designed to how to carry those size of
Those
vehicles.
size.
Yeah.
Right. Mm. So there are so many factors to consider. Even if you're gonna think about those bike lanes, it would be easier to maybe produce more parks like Emancipation Parks then, in some
Yeah,
urban centers.
yeah. It's just a lot of I want to say like you have to be a lot more thoughtful in terms of the urban development. The reason why it is that we have a bunch of private motor cars anyways, because town centers are not developed in such a way that public transport is seen as
Ah,
a feasible thing.
yes,
The town is the where it is that you work is very different from where it is that you go to buy groceries, which is very different from where it is that might be a place of worship, etc.
true.
If it is
Yes,
that all of these things were designed in such a way that it is that we're going to have JUTC buses going to these centers at this time reliably, etc., then the
mm-hmm,
incentive to
mm-hmm.
basically get a car that you're going to have to pay registration, insurance, gas,
Ah,
basically,
talk
it's
to
a
us
lot
about
more.
it. True. That is so true. So many times, Daniel, up to this evening on campus, I was speaking with a friend and I was saying to her, I'm gonna get a bus card. With all the wars and rumors of wars. Yes, and petrol and oil and all of that. So
Yes, I am dreading going to the gas station.
yes. So maybe it is I need to get one of those bus cards and start to get familiar with public transportation again like that. But do you realize what's happening here too? Happening in terms of our discussion. Have you ever, and I'm throwing this question out to you, have you ever just have you ever written an article in any of our, local newspaper on anything like this?
No, never.
And no, right. And now that we're having this kind of conversation, do you think that you're now gonna just think about it and sometimes just pen just an opinion piece for persons to see and have other people thinking? Because I say to students all the time, especially helping professionals, because I facilitate across faculties, right? You have your hands on the pulse. You see what's happening as helping professionals in whatever area that you are in. And now being trained, as public health practitioners, you are poised. You are in a position of authority to make certain opinions where these things are concerned. And yes, we might talk about them here in class, but you need to put it out there. Other persons might agree with you. Some of the policy makers might just see something and copy it. And oh, that was your thought, but it's all right. They can run with it if it's going to make this place a better place, this world a better place. All right. So thank you so much for your contribution here again. And I just wanted to highlight this. 2023 being the hottest Earth has ever recorded. And this newspaper here stated that Jamaica emerged the country, I think it's Gleaner, yes. Jamaica emerged the country where climate change was most powerfully at work, according to the new reports by Climate Central. Do you remember how hot that year was?
Yeah.
And so here again, we are looking at climate change. Could we say, environmentally, climate change being one of those determinants of health? Do we call it social determinant or do we call it natural determinant? Which would you put it?
Well, the natural
You
affects
could
the social
argue,
because it's
you
too
could
hot.
argue it's
Because we're
social.
not going outside.
So
Yeah.
Jody, two of you were talking, but I didn't get everything that you said. Repeat, please.
I was
You can
saying
go
that
first, Rod.
it's natural. However, it affects the social because if it's too hot, persons won't go outside.
Right.
I'd
And
And
sooner
I
so,
would
look at it
say,
as social.
yeah, I would say it's social
I'd sooner say
because
social because you can migrate. You don't have to,
not,
if it is that you can choose not to live in a particular climate, you'll move.
but also climate change is driven by human
ah,
consumption of fossil fuels.
Rainer, that was my thought.
Yeah,
Climate trade, climate change is driven, is spawned by,
yeah,
what people do, persons' behavior, this greenhouse gas emissions and so on, eh? Yes. So even though it manifests as natural, really, it is socially spawned. Let me put it that way.
yeah.
And
And
so, go
I, I
ahead.
would I would also want to add that it is going to be socially solved as well, because nature is not going to help us with it. We're going to have to make the decisions to make the necessary changes in order to reduce the impacts.
And do you really think that we're gonna solve this problem?
I think when it gets hot enough, we're gonna
Yeah,
try.
yeah.
I don't know. I feel like nature will just have to do its own thing and reclaim
Nature is doing its own thing. It's more so just how you want to put it. As
adaptation.
impassioned, yeah, no, as impassioned as it is that you want to get about it, I feel like it's going to reach a place where it just has to reach the point where, short of I want to say violent revolution, it's just going to kind of have to be a point where the more, how I want to put it, economically feasible decision is to then kind of transition to renewables as opposed to continuing how it is that we do production currently, which is largely via fossil fuels
And I
That's
want
true.
to, I want
and
to, I want to
overfishing, etc.
throw, I want to stoke that argument a little, but just to say, I don't want to sound cynical, but I think the argument is a bit hypocritical in some cases because the persons, the overseers, the leaders in charge who ask ordinary people to change behaviors while they themselves keep very high emission travel habits without good justification, sometimes luxurious and unnecessary travel habits, right? Two things can be true at once. The the emissions from motor vehicles, industrialization, etc. Though the
Right.
impact is known and it is obvious, but it can't be the case where people are just doing as they please and then sending this message and not practicing what they preach. One and two, many industrial processes are much cheaper when executed using fossil fuels, and for that reason there has been
Mhm.
little crackdown from a litigious standpoint and a
Mhm.
policy standpoint against these processes because you want to maintain cheap input for maximized profits when switching to renewables would make these processes either more complicated or more costly and cost these big corporations
At the
more money.
outset, eh? At the outset,
Right.
at the outset, but
Absolutely.
over the long term, it might be cheaper over the long
Right.
term,
But
all
nobody's
things
making the
considered.
sacrifices, and the persons in
Mhm.
charge aren't pushing for the major corporations to do so. And they themselves are still participating in high emission
Mhm. Mhm.
behaviors. So
Yeah,
that
that's
ought to be
true.
considered as well.
That's true, Akeem. The hypocrisy is there. Yes?
The whole business about what Akeem is speaking of is what in climate circles they call common but differentiated responsibility. So yes, big emitters do need to cut, but
Mm-hmm.
small emitters or emergent emitters do need to make adjustments. You have to develop in different
Mm-hmm.
ways,
Mm-hmm.
or we're gonna fry, like literally.
Mm-hmm.
So even the scenario that Daniel talks about, super alarming to me. I'm really hoping that we change course somehow, because in the process of getting to that extreme, Caribbean SIDS, for example, will be no more. We will be no more. Like literally, right?
Yeah,
To say
because
nothing of
but it
islands in
has
the Pacific
started
and so on.
right now.
And it has started,
It has
yes.
started, or shorelines are eating away.
Right. And if we think about Melissa, for example,
Oh
Hurricane Melissa,
Lord, please
that
do
is
not
indicative of what it
re-traumatize
is.
me.
Yes. Right. And I would also want to say something to Akim's point about some of the things that aren't being done. In truth and in fact, what is being observed, and I think there is a UNEP report on it that says globally people are becoming a little bit more litigious around climate change. So a number of local communities of actors are taking some of these big corporations to court to say that in the interest of climate justice, they have been, persisting with some of these actions that are detrimental to humanity, and therefore they
Mhm.
must be held to bear. So there is a growing number of legal cases around the world, perhaps less so in our region and more so in North America
Right,
and Europe. But people are taking action. People are, we're trying to move the needle a little bit.
right. So let's keep our eyes on that needle and see, how far it moves. All right. Thank you so much for that, Reno. So I did mention this here. We're talking about I'm looking for the structural and intermediary determinants of health. In my objectives, we touched on it. Now, in countries at all levels of income, health and illness follows a social gradient. And so the lower socioeconomic position, the worse the health, we know that. And so the maldistribution of health care, which means here not delivering care to those who most need it, is considered one of the social determinants of health. But when we look here at this diagram, looking at structural and intermediary determinants, let me see if I can find my pointer. Where is it? There's a pointer. All right. So this diagram here is actually using an ecological framework. Here we are looking at the macro level, individual level, and population level. Yes. And what they're saying here is that at the macro level, socioeconomic and political context, I have macro level here. They didn't say this, but of course we know that's what we're dealing with at this level: governance, macroeconomic politics. You know, those areas that leaders who what's the word I'm looking for, who um controls the commanding height sometimes of certain economies, if they don't think that a certain area is important, they're not going to put any money in that area. So if they don't think that climate change is important, they are not going to shunt money there. If they don't think that how should I give me some areas that some people don't think is important. Um, you know, Proper housing stock, for example, is important. They are not going to shunt money there. So these macro levels are important, and they're far reaching. Social policies, the public policies, health education policies, as it relates to health policies and social policies, how many helping professionals help to make those decisions? That is why I like to see when there are doctors in politics. I like to see when there are, teachers in politics. I don't see many teachers. I don't see many, police officers and so on. Public health inspectors or anybody. I see a few doctors. But guess what? I call all of you helping professionals. And like I said before, the reality on the ground, because you're working with people on a daily basis and you see the outcomes, the impact of some of the policies which are put in place. I encourage you to position yourselves so that you can make an impact here, at least on some of these policies, because you understand and you see what's happening. So labor market, housing, education, health, our culture and societal values. I am glad that now we have a Jamaica move. At least I see so many persons these days just exercising, and I feel good and I feel bad at the same time because they're out there exercising. I'm driving in early morning to go to work. Yes. But this culture of getting up and move, hopefully generations to come, people will take their health more seriously, and it will be inculcated, it will be part of our societal values to just move. When you go places, when you travel like the north and so on, especially Canada and Sweden and places that, I had the opportunity of being, I see people going to work on their bicycles. You see a woman in her suit, with her touchy case on her bicycle, and she's riding to work. And I'm like, whoa, in Jamaica, is it that we're so proud we wouldn't do that? I don't know. What about you, Makisha? What about you, Raina? Would you be willing to ditch your car and ride a bicycle to work?
My
Oh,
God,
I wouldn't
it's so
ditch my
sorry.
car to ride a bicycle to work. I'm sorry.
I will
Plus,
I will go as
I
far as to
live in
add.
HDPH, so
Oh, go ahead,
it's a
go ahead,
very
go ahead,
controversial
finish.
area. Oh, hello?
Yes, I'm hearing the Makisha,
Yeah.
you were all chorusing together. I'm waiting for one person to
No,
speak.
I was
Okay.
saying, Makisha, you go ahead. I'll go after.
Mhm.
All right. So I was saying I would not ride my bicycle to work simply because even if I wanted to, it's a dangerous area. It could get shot right outside of KPH there.
Oh, I see. Yes, they would just take you off the bicycle, Makisha. They wouldn't even bother to shoot you. I don't think so. They'll just say, give me that. And I'm sure you wouldn't resist. So you just give it to them.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
would give it to them, but they do the drive-bys sometimes if they want
Oh,
a specific person.
oh, right,
Because
right.
nurses have been shot before,
Oh,
PCAs and so forth.
right, right. I understand. So really, volatility of the area within which you work, that's understandable. That's understandable. I kind of forgot, you know. As a matter of fact, even UHWI, we talk about, the volatility of, say, downtown where KPH is. But I tell you something, UHWI is not any safer. Akeem, you wanted to say something? As a matter of fact, the social condition, and that kind of, what should I call it now? Volatility in the communities. That's a social determinant right there too, community
I
violence.
was just gonna add that one of the offices I used to work at was very close to a place I used to stay. So I used to actually walk to work on occasion and
Mhm.
back. But that was highly dependent on, the area you were working, the perceived safety or lack thereof, and the distance and all of those things. But, yeah.
Yes, Akeem, thank you. So you have to take into consideration personal safety on different fronts. So of course here culture at the macro level, when you come to the individual level, we already know that, a person's educational status, their occupation, and of course by extension income might very well be pegged to their educational level. I like to say sometimes we know that you have persons who are underemployed. So, they might be quite educated, but they have a job that, really is not, I wouldn't say in alignment, but comparable with the level of education that they have. But that's all right. Sometimes it's a means to an end for many persons, not the end in itself. And of course, social class. In the Caribbean, in Jamaica, for example, we know for those of us who've done sociology, we are very classist. And so when people are relegated to different classes, we have upper, middle, lower, and in Jamaica, we have no class. Sometimes you have people who don't have no class at all, right? And so all these things. As a matter of fact, class, one of the things I've observed over the years, some persons who sometimes internalize some of these stereotypes, and they themselves, will, how should I say it now, kind of segregate themselves from certain persons who they consider to be in a particular class. Have you ever observed that? Am I making sense?
You are. It happens all the time. And you see it in a very, one of the sort of examples of is you will see a spot, for example, like a particular restaurant in Jamaica,
Yes.
in Kingston, say, it opens up and there is a certain set that goes, and then the moment it begins to become a little bit more diverse, you find that the set that used to go there initially, they move to someplace else. Yeah.
Yep. Yep. Or the converse could also be true, where some people feel like, oh, are rich people over there, so them, that's enough for me. It really, really just amazes me to hear some people walking on, say the plazas, and there's a particular store, and they feel like that store is not for them. That store is for, people from this class or that class. So some persons too, at the individual level, based on how they see themselves, we're talking about, I think it's George Cooley who spoke of the looking glass self. Yeah, so people see themselves based on how others talk about them and based on how they internalize this. So they view themselves that way.
But
We
Miss, many of us, oh, I'm so sorry.
April, go ahead,
I was
April.
gonna say many of us, even though it may not be as, bold-faced as in some situations, culture has been like that from such an early age. There are many parents who believe their children just can't go to certain schools, not because of the academics, it's just they think it's beneath them, for example. So we kind of seep these things, you start planting the seed
Yeah.
from the earliest of age in terms of classism and who can go where and where you should or what job is beneath you. It starts from a very young age,
That's true.
in our households in the smallest of ways, and a lot of people are kind of just turning a blind eye to the fact that they're introducing classism from that very young age.
That's true. That's true. That's true. But what can we do? Because you see, within people's private household, the subcultures are so different. And that's the first, I want to say, primary agent of socialization. And so when it's inculcated in you that, hey, you are the best, and there's nobody like you, and it instills a kind of confidence, I know, April, but also it instills this sense of entitlement, right? And so from there it starts, yes. So a lot of times I think you hear me drawing quite a bit on the sociologists. I'm trying to remember one of our local sociologists who say people mingle, but they really don't mix. Yeah. So when you talk about social class, you'll hear we talk, we laugh, but some people think that, okay, I know that's where it ends because we're mingling, but we're not gonna mix. So ethnicity also. So racism in the Caribbean island, I'm not so sure racism is an issue. I can be corrected, but I think that it's more ethnocentrism, or as we said, colorism, and we say, classism that permeates our society. Now, Rainer, you're talking about the labeling theory. Are we
Right.
talking about a kind of othering? because I'm
Yes.
not familiar with the labeling theory.
Right. It was to the point that you were making about Cooley, with the looking glass self and so on.
Oh, George Cooley.
Right, yes.
Yes, yes. Yes. So labeling and there's a new term now, the othering. If you can go look it up, there's this thing called othering, the us and them, which basically is the same thing, people saying the same things in a different way. Now, based on the policies here, the public policies, governance and macro policies and so on, helps to dictate educational level and as I said before, which also is tied to occupation and income. But when we come to the population level here, material circumstances, living, working condition, the availability, accessibility of food, the kinds of food. Now, I don't know, it could be conspiracy theories, but sometimes, you go on some social media site and people are showing some things that are fake food, fake cabbage, fake fish. Please tell me that this is just AI and this is not true. People are showing meat that's like plastic, and I'm saying, wow, yes. We need to, and I don't want to get political, but back in the day, there was an era in Jamaica where we were encouraged to grow, to eat what we grow. And so with regards availability of food, accessibility and quality food, I think that's where we need to get back to. Yeah. But based on the population level now, so I if you notice these yellow labels here, I add them in, except this one. I just colored this one in, but these yellow labels just to delineate the macro from the individual to the population level. But when we talk about social cohesion, you realize that the authors have social cohesion and social capital straddling the population and individual level. Why do you think this is so? And
Sorry,
I
Doc,
want
can you repeat the question, Doc?
so the authors here, the persons who designed this flow chart, I want to call it. Is it a flow chart or whatever, this diagram? They have social cohesion and social capital straddling the population level and the individual level. And I'm asking, why do you think they've done this? All right. I want you to observe that all these things, all these factors here, many of these variables are reciprocal. Do you notice that the arrows point this way and that way? Whatever happens here impact the individual level, the population level. Whatever happens here at the individual level also impacts the population level. Yeah? That is why in an ecological framework, there's reciprocity at every level. Whatever happens, health, is it community violence? Is it, are we talking about policies? Whatever happens will have a ripple effect up and down where these levels are concerned. So at the population level, behavior and biological factors, psychosocial factors impact, or the individuals here. Remember, individuals are who make up the population. So of course, it goes without saying that the individual level would be straddling the population level. Let me put it that way. People, individuals are nestled within the population right here. And so even this is at the micro level, you find this now would be what we call in ecological terms, the meso level, MESO level right here. But what is social capital? When we talk about social capital, what are we talking about here? Let me just read the chat a little bit. Interdependent. Yes, Akim. So you can't divorce one from the other. If some of you might have been in my I might have taught you during undergrad. And I want you to remember when we did that echo map. Some of you who've never been in my class in an undergrad med might not remember. But when you, even if you go online and you look at the ecological model, you'll see circles within a circle, circles within circles. And that's because they want to show how nestled, how interdependent and interrelated each level is, or these levels are to each other. Yeah. So when we talk about social capital here, what exactly are we talking about?
We're talking about the people in this class who hopefully I'll be able to call upon once the program is finished.
Yes, the bonds and networks, the relationships and the benefits that we as individuals and as groups gain from those relationships, being able to connect with your neighbors, your peers, mentorship, guidance, and how that really helps individuals and communities grow.
So what we're talking about, so we're talking about community, right? And we are now, because you've mentioned the people in the class, your colleagues here, and the bonding and so on, you're now talking about a community of interest. Do you recognize that? And within this community of interest, you're looking at social capital being, persons within this community of interest, looking out for each other, bonding with each other. You realize that? But then we also have that geographical community where we also have social capital. When the people within those communities or residents from a particular community engage in activities to build their community and the bonding taking place within that community to build the social capital. But there are things that actually diminish social capital within any community, whether it's community of interest or the geographical community. Let's take, for example, your community here of interest. I want to call it the helping community. What are some of those things that could be happening that could lessen social capital within your circle?
People don't trust each other. You have the same othering that you talk about.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, he works over ministry, or she's a doctor, or she's a nurse. And so where you have that kind of othering, trust is not developed. And if you don't have trust, then there's no safety, and therefore there can be no social capital.
That's part of community. There's actually a community theory, and when you talk like that, Rainer, boy, I tell you, so when people don't trust each other, so you go in a community, let's look at the geographical community now. You go in a community, you're searching for somebody legitimately, you really want to see that person. All right, let me put on my social work hat. Been to a community, there's this guy who was a soldier, and it's a real case now. Brought his brother to the hospital. This brother is ready now has been discharged, but they can't find any money. So we went to the community to find, family members, and we asked, and nobody knew them. It's like everybody you ask, they don't know. Until knowing me, I just had it up to here. So I just got out my car. So let me tell you something. Flip ID, I'm come from the hospital. His brother is there. He needs to come home. That is why. So all of a sudden, everybody knows the man. And would you believe, class? 2 houses down is where the man lived. But guess what? That trust of which you spoke, Reina. So many persons within communities don't trust each other, and they don't trust outsiders. And so what you find, this lessens social capital. But some other factors that decrease social capital within any community too, it's just time as a resource that people don't have to engage in certain activities. So medical doctor, school teacher, police officer, public health practitioner, here, officer, you're going to school, you have family to deal with, you have this and that to do, you're working 2 jobs. You leave, you go to the gym, you come back home, you don't have time to take part in activities within your community. So if within say a depressed community, that persons who have to go out to eke out a living, so they out of the community early, they go out early, they come home late, they have to take care of their kids, they're too tired to do anything, they don't have time to take part in certain activities. You have to be dedicated to want to do that. And so just, living life can sometimes lessen or decrease social capital within your community.
Dr. Harrison, I think we sort of related to what you're saying about so basically people not able to participate in things. I think related to that is the emergence of social media, So much of our bonds, and I'm using that word very loosely, is taking place in that space. And when the pressures of life come to bear, many people suddenly find that there is nobody with whom they really have a
Yeah.
proper relationship, and therefore nobody on whom they can call as a part of that social capital to support them through whatever it is. Because in a way, what is going on in that social space is it's artificial. It's just a slice of life, and sometimes the slice is not even the truth. So people, to relate it again, related to what you said, they're not really getting a chance to really bond. Bonding takes time and, effort. And so we're kind of developing this kind of artificial space for ourselves that, when tested in real life, is not really holding up in a lot of cases.
That's true. That's true. Live in communities where people don't know your name is just hi neighbor, and they're off again. Yeah. So we in our own individual spaces, I'm glad, and I like what I heard here about people bonding, people from different nation states bonding, because again I say sometimes you never know where you're gonna meet somebody. You don't know when you would have to call on somebody. So cultivate, make that friend before you need a friend now. Yeah.
And I want to add to just to
Yes,
on top of
Becky.
what Peter just said, opportunities for bonding because in the vast expanse of being busy, going to work, going to school, taking care of kids, you don't find much. Well, many people, I'd say me, I don't know about everybody else, but I'd say for most people, you don't find a lot of opportunities or spaces wherein you can actually cultivate these relationships because you're focusing on the tasks more than you're focusing on the people. You're focusing on outcomes and products than more than process. And so you don't get a lot of chance to really build community and build relationships. You just see people in passing if you see them at all. And so there's not a lot of chance for that to really develop. So creating more spaces, more opportunities, more networks where that force or at least cultivate the interaction, etc., would really help. But that's, I guess, another, story altogether.
No, but I am also thinking, Akeem, while you speak, that it has to be a concerted effort in our small ways. In each and every one of us will have to make that effort to cultivate that kind of bonding with our friendship groups. We have to do it in our small ways. We might not be able to do it on a large scale or a scale that we would like, but begin to cultivate from now that friendship group, this person or two or three. I personally, I have a friendship group. Four of us, we call ourselves the Fabulous Four. And believe me, I really just love my group. We look out for each other. We pray together. We go places together. We just have fun. We just sit, talk, cry on each other's shoulder if we have to and stuff like that. I think everybody needs such a group. We travel together. And I remember in a space, and I was talking about my group, and this older woman, she was saying, she has a friendship group of about 4 or 5 of them. They travel the world and they do this and do that. And I was so encouraged. I would say to you, have that kind of friendship group. Have that kind of friendship group. And you look back the next 10, 20 years and say, man, we have been going places, we have been. And it really is a good feeling. Yeah. Yes, the work is there and all of that, but we have to take time out for ourselves. Right, Aki? Yes. So
Agreed.
yes. To top this off now, I just want to say, and I'm reading from my notes here where this diagram is concerned, in addition to our genetic codes, which can act as blueprint for certain health conditions, there are structural variables we've just discussed which help to determine health outcomes, wherein at the macro level, the kinds of decision made, the fiscal decisions, policy implementation, social safety netting, and just general cultural tendencies are important, whereas at the personal level, or sex, gender, intellectual prowess help to determine health outcomes by dictating our standard of living. So all these things do help to dictate or play a part in where we live and how we live, what we do to survive each day. And all these are found to be associated with family health or ill health. Yeah. The other significant contributors are health behaviors and medical care. In sharp contrast, the WHO says the contribution of genes and biology are rather small in comparison to all these other psychosocial or social determinants. At the individual level, these findings underscore the immense importance and influence of social determinants on individual health. In fact, they say the social determinants of health, that health professions or professionals rather, are themselves play an integral role as mediators and other influential factors in the patient's life. You are actually seeing health professionals as determinants of health. Have you ever considered yourself such? So the WHO Commission on Health, which is, they produce a diagram saying that you of yourselves, health professionals, you are determinants of health. How so? How do you think?
Yes.
Speak again. Let me see who was talking.
That was Daniel.
I was saying yes. I was saying yeah. In the sense that if it is that you conceptualize yourself as a health practitioner, as a community resource. So everybody in your family know a doctor. Yep. In friends, yep, family, immediate friends, when say them know a doctor, so them going trying to bounce things off you. And in that context, they're getting access to something that it is that they might otherwise not have been able to at that time.
Beautiful. So in the role, WHO call you mediators. Yeah. Health professionals play an integral role as mediators of other influential factors. So that's what you're saying, Daniel, those influential factors, those health education, stuff like that. Yeah. And in the role of mediator, the individual physician has the ability to support favorable situations and to mitigate adverse conditions and consequences in the lives of patients. And in your regard, what you've just shared with us, Daniel, it's not just your patient, but anybody within your social environment, because of your skill sets, you are able to impart that kind of knowledge and mediate some factors right there. So yeah, helping professionals, all of you are determinants of health when you put it like that. So we're going to change gears a bit to look at social gradient of health. And here's this graphic here that's just showing you health inequalities or unjust and avoidable differences in persons' health. And so the playing field is not level, the unlevel playing field here. Good start in life, being in control of your life, having, so socioeconomic circumstances benefit some more than others. And so not everyone has the same opportunities to lead a healthy life. I am sometimes of the opinion that some people just born disadvantaged, put it that way. I am not sure if this playing field will ever be level. Do you think the playing field will ever be level?
I agree. There is no leveling the playing field. What I think the aim should be is um the aim should always be to ensure a minimum viable standard of operations that ensures a certain bare minimum for every, and that bare minimum can't be below a certain baseline, but to ask
Right.
for everything to be level, no, for it to be equitable. Yes, so the most underserved, the most needy get the most out of the system, but it won't be
Mm.
equal. And for us to try to make it equal is too idealistic. And it takes us back to the definition of health itself, a
Right.
state of complete mental, physical, and not just the absence of disease or infirmity. It's very idealistic. I always had that issue with that definition. Complete implies an ideal which is unattainable. So
Mhm.
it's much more realistic to approach it such that we aim for a minimum viable set of standards where people can live and be happy and be well.
And so,
Yeah.
in a
So
nutshell, what
that's
I heard you saying also, I'm coming to you, Daniel. I think you're agreeing with Akeem, right? Am I correct?
correct. Just
Right.
different wording, but yeah.
Yeah, man, but I agree with you wholeheartedly, Akeem, because I too believe that in many instances, inequality a lot of times equal equity. I don't know if that makes sense because based on the unlevel playing field, persons at this end of the field would need a little bit more in order to be anywhere near here. So if it means help, the severity and the circumstances surrounding each person's need is so different that it cannot be equal across the board. So this is why I'm saying and agreeing with you that inequality in many instances will equal equity, that fairness that we're talking about when we talk about equity. Yeah?
Mm, in the same vein, just because it's not equal doesn't mean it has to be any less dignified.
Ah, I like the way you put that, Danielle. I like the way you put that, right? Because dignity and worth of a person, that's one of those social work tenets too. Dignity and worth. So we have to see people of worth. And whatever it is we do for them or with them, you know, we have to try to maintain their dignity. So the unequal distribution of health, damaging experience is not a natural phenomenon, says the Commission on Health. It results from a combination, they say, of these things listed here: social policies and programs, poor social policies and programs, poor economic arrangements, and bad politics. Yeah. So we have unfair economic arrangements and bad politics. I'm getting tongue-tied. And this could be a whole class. This this could be something that we just, what we intimated a while ago about equity and inequality or equality, speak to some of these things. And I remember you know, decades ago when I was doing undergrad in social sciences with one Mrs. Inararity, I think her name was in social policy, and looking at social net, safety netting and all of that. One of the issues I have with, for example, the PATH program, where everybody basically gets the same across the board in terms of that stipend that people get, is the same thing that we've just discussed. The severity and need. You might have somebody on path who, can afford it a little bit better than somebody else, somebody who has more chronic conditions than the other. And so when this person gets the same amount of the financial stipend as the other person, you see where that is not equitable. I feel that the needs of each person need to be assessed in such a way individually, and persons be granted whatever financial benefits that's afforded them in that way. But again, I think it's, the ability of governments to afford these things. So moving right along here now, WHO is also saying that not delivering care to those who most need it or needing of it is a social determinant of health. And of course, it goes without saying, if people need health care and they're not getting the kind of health care that they ought to get, that determines health outcomes. So again, I say that goes without saying. But I want to bring your attention to something here about the level playing field. This might be an aside, but just to show why I believe that the playing field may never be level. And here are these things. The existence of poverty ensures dirty work is done. So there are positive functions to poverty. There's a reason people want to have others being poor. I think it's Hans. If I can remember the author, I think it's Hans, his name. That's the name of the author who wrote this. The existence of poverty ensures dirty work is done. The poor subsidizes the affluent via consumption and investment activities by virtue of poor wages they receive. Tell me if you disagree or you agree with these things.
But just to say, Dr. Harrison, that the
Yes.
second one sounds very Marxian.
I
Yeah,
know.
no, for real.
So you know this is coming
I
way
mean,
back
like,
from my sociology classes.
Yes.
no, I feel like Engels had a hand in
Especially,
Maybe.
that's true.
So poverty creates job for a number. Yes, there's this conflict theory going on here. Poverty creates jobs for a number of occupations, such as ours. And the poor contributes to the economic viability of businesses and professionals listed above. The poor buys goods that some people don't want, food that's nearly expired, and used cars. Imagine that, eh?
Amen.
I don't know. I don't know, but for me, some of us are just cheapskates. I didn't hear that. What was that? Was that Akeem or Danielle?
I was just jokingly saying I feel very attacked in my used car.
Well, I said cheapskate, you see, because some of us just have a thing about certain things, all right? So the poor can be identified and punished as alleged or real deviance to uphold the legitimacy of dominant norms. Deserving poor provides intrinsic satisfaction, evoking passion and charity to the more fortunate, so people want to feel like they're doing something good, and so they do. Poverty helps to guarantee the status of those who are not poor, and the poor, being powerless, can be made to absorb the economic and political costs of change and growth in society. Now, this one here, I
small
think is
point on the third to last one.
what about the last one?
No, I was saying small point on that third to last one in terms of the deserving poor provides intrinsic satisfaction.
Yeah.
So just that statement alone just kind of implies that there is an undeserving poor. And how do they define that?
Listen to me now. If you when you do sociology and you go way back, I think it originates in sometimes the welfare benefit back in Britain back in the day. I think is either the 19th century and so on. They consider some people to be undeserving poor because they feel like they were poor because they were vagabonds and they were lazy and didn't want to work. So they
Yeah,
didn't
but
deserve
even then, it's
which
like the attribute the attribution of a moralistic value onto what is fundamentally an economical argument.
Mhm. Yeah. I agree with you. So yes. But as I said before, of all these things, the one that really resonates with me is the poor absorbing those economic shocks. Yeah, but that's true. I'm always of the opinion that if for people who do not have the means of production, so when you have those, for example, taxes, increase in taxes, now gas gone up, this gone up, and who you think gonna absorb those shocks? Not the people with the means of production. It shall be those who do not have, who has to continue to buy at a higher price. Because
You can
the
also look at
yeah,
the
just
person's how it is that basically with every big, I want to say, economic crisis or whatnot, like more billionaires just happen to be made
yeah.
regardless. So even in the COVID-19 pandemic, a lot of persons became billionaires. Like we have more billionaires in the world now than we did
Mhm,
prior to that.
mhm, mhm.
It's just the nature of capital to concentrate.
Yes. Yeah. So
And
why
I'm sorry, isn't the opposite narrative also true? Where without the rich to provide jobs, without the rich to be able to go and do the analysis to find the oil so that we can pump the oil to generate the resources needed for modern life. Without the rich being able to do that, modern life wouldn't exist. And so more people would also be in poverty because you need jobs to lift people
Frank?
out of poverty.
Of
I'm
Frank,
gonna
Disagree.
I'm gonna say that we're not saying that production shouldn't exist. It's just that things need to be distributed more evenly rather than being concentrated with a few.
But then how do
So
you
yes, the
determine that
rich, huh?
distribution? How do you determine that distribution? Because one of the arguments, and don't get me wrong, I do believe that resources should be there should be a basic amount of resources that are available to persons because poverty should not exist in a modern world where we can spend $400 million a day shooting a weapon, right?
uh,
So there's that. But the argument among the rich is I have worked hard and this is what is due to me. Why is it that what is due to me must be given to someone else who has not
all
done the work?
right. Right.
Can
So,
I, so,
um,
Dr. Harrison?
yes.
Right.
And
Oh, I
one
just
last
wanted,
comment. Was it Blake
sorry,
or who is gonna have the last word here?
I
And
just wanted to say something to Alicia's point. Like
yes.
the Marxists will tell you arguably that the way you said it earlier, like you say, the rich, if the rich didn't do this and that, they will tell you that the rich actually, they're not the ones doing it. It's the labor that they employ that is doing it.
Exactly.
Is the
And that in fact,
Agree.
proletariat.
right. Those people
These
aren't
resources
appropriately
naturally
rewarded.
occurred on the earth.
Exactly.
They didn't do anything outside of basically just kind of, it's just one guy pointing to it. That's it.
The bourgeois and the proletariats. But here what now? The real reason. So Alisa, to answer your question in a nutshell, yes, there's always the converse. And the converse is also true. There are always two sides to that coin. Yeah. And both are needed. But the reason I brought this up and I, place this slide here is just to show that because it's my opinion that the playing field will never be level. But as we said, I think we've come full circle. I think it was Daniel or Akim who said earlier, as long as people achieve or is able to live a certain standard of living relative to others, just a good standard of living where they can afford at least what they want when they want and how they want, and at least good, health services. So yeah. All right. Um, Coming now to look at WHO. So, we're getting some information from the World Health Organization. We're looking on the Commission on the Social Determinants of Health. I think this was mentioned when we were looking at, the different levels, that ecological model of health. What was it called again? The structural and intermediary determinants. Now, the commission was set up by WHO in 2005 to marshal the evidence on what can be done to promote health equity and foster a global movement to achieve health equity. All right. So here are some, well, not suggestions yet. The commission's overarching recommendations. They have other suggestions, but the overarching recommendations that they have are as follows: improve conditions of daily life based on where people grow, live, work, and age. Does that sound familiar to anybody? Jamaicans, does that sound familiar to you?
Yes, it does. Is it
Yes.
sound like our 2030 plan?
Our 2030 goal to place, live, grow, and
Yes.
do business. Not true. That is why I bold it. So you say all of that is lodged in public health right there. But this goes beyond local. CARFA actually, has some recommendations too that sound very familiar. But for me, when I look at these recommendations, these 3 recommendations by WHO, which here do you think is the driving force of these 3? Improve condition, tackle the equitable distribution of power, money, resources, and measure problem, evaluate action, expand the knowledge base. For me, number 3 goes without saying. I think this has been done already in our nation states where, we know the problems.
Number 2 is it?
Yes.
That is your power and money.
And
It's going
resources.
to be the crux of the matter.
Yeah. If we are able to just even incrementally, yes, tackle the fairness or, the inequitable distribution of these things, maybe not power or so much money, but just even the resources, that everything else will fall into place. Everything, yeah. Improvement in conditions of daily life, I think, will come about, and workforce that is trained in social determinants. This is a given. This I think has already been happening in our necks of the wood, but this one is crucial to the other 2 right here. There's 2 in the chat. Okay. Alisa, you're saying we need a sociology class to hear these points. Of course we do. Of course we do. All right.
Future persons going out there to work, we need to be armed with the right tools to hold these discussions.
I know. And so if you notice, I sometimes just draw on some of those concepts from the social sciences. Some of you in class here might have done, some people have done first degrees, or some persons sometimes as electives, something might intrigue you. I remember doing my first degree, things like anthropology intrigued me. Psychology, wow, I just want to know how people think and behave in society. Even though I was being trained at my undergrad level for social work, I study all those things because I just wanted to know, just knowledge. Daniel said, your hobbies. All right, just want knowledge right there. All right, so what time is it? So we have half an hour to go, moving right along. I don't know if you're enjoying this class like I am, but just quickly to say, so here now we have Jamaica's Vision 2030, you see? People empowered to achieve their fullest. Cohesive and just society, prosperous economy, healthy natural environment. You see that? Sounds very similar to those WHO recommendations. I thought I had something from CARFA here. I don't know where that is. But needless to say, though, that the CARFA has something similar to what the WHO says. So we're just now going to change gears a little bit to look at some of those recommendations now. Things we can do to foster health equity within our spaces. So I have here early childhood development. What can you tell me? Why is this thing on? What can you tell me about this and how we can foster, excuse me, how we can foster, healthy environments through early childhood development? I think you can speak to this more than I can.
Well, I think to start, there are maybe three things. One is to look at like how parenting is done. Another element of it could be nutrition, right? Because then we see the connection between development in terms of nutrition and our NCD's problem and so on. And then, what was the third point I was thinking? The nutrition and education. We need to get some foundational things right when it comes to educating our children, so that again, that will help to carry them through as they age.
Right. I thank you. So I want us to, and you've touched on that some, Reina. I want us to look at these what should I call them now? Suggestions using the lens of the biopsychosocial. So I hear you looking at the biological in terms of nutrition and so on, the social, the educational aspect, but we also want to see what it is we are inculcating, morals and in the psychic of our children. Yes. So, right. So the early childhood is very important.
Excuse me, and also it's important to have the systems in place to identify early the children who are going to have challenges, and
Yes.
then ensuring that the support systems are in place. Because if you want them to achieve their full potential, the earlier you identify what the challenge is going to be and
Yes.
applying the interventions, then the outcomes are going to be better.
Thank you so much for that, Nicole. Looking forward to next week when we have that special need session. Yes, some of those very structures that ought to be in place, the support that parents need when they recognize that their children, will have certain challenges, just to enable them to reach their full potential is very important. Another suggestion here is full fair employment. I don't even know what that means. This idealistic, I want to say, because is there ever full employment, fair employment? I don't know. Decent work is can be achieved though. Decent work. But what do we call decent work? What is decent work? And what is indecent work? Is there any work that is not decent? I don't know.
I mean, it just depends on, I guess, what the values of, I want to say, like the dominant sector of society wouldn't imply. So, I don't know, indecent work,
So something like
easy
sex
one
work
that it
would
is
be
a person's
indecent work.
consider sex work. Yeah, people consider sex work indecent. Um, what
I
else do people
don't
consider
think, though,
indecent?
the concept of decent work is really about the work that is being done as much as the working environment in which people are employed. So you
Well,
could be
I, I'd say
you could
equal.
be a garbage collector, but it is the working environment, the safety requirements, the remuneration, the benefits from being there, ensuring that people get the time off when they're supposed to get the time off. I think that is more what we're talking about when we say decent work. Because you
I
could be a
mean,
doctor, but your work environment is not necessarily decent work because
yeah, but
you're overworked and all the other things that make your work not so decent.
but
Right.
you could sooner put being a garbage collector or a doctor on a form if it is a trying to open a bank account as opposed to if it is a trying to say, yeah, I'm a sex worker. That's, I'd sooner say it can be both, but I think a lot of it, so I'd say like 50-50 in terms of like the nature of the label, but also the environment of the label. I'd sooner to that point too.
Well, if I could just jump in here, well, the ILO says that decent work encapsulates the aspirations of people in their working lives. It involves opportunities for work that is productive and delivers a fair income, security in the workplace, and social protection for all, together with better prospects for personal development and social integration, freedom for people to express their concerns, organize, and participate in the decisions that affect their lives, and equality of opportunity and treatment for all women and men. And then I would add, since we're on the sociology train, Marx would say that this is in encapsulated in that definition that the ILO presents to us. This is exactly what Marx has long talked about. Um, you know, workers needing to also be connected with the outputs from their work. So you
Yeah.
need to feel a part
The
of what it is
alienation.
that is being produced. You know, so
Yep.
so I would say that sex work is not necessarily indecent work.
In
Not
this.
necessarily. No, no,
I
no,
agree.
no. I
I
mean,
agree.
if you have a
Hmm.
framework and certain conditions and so on, so maybe,
Yeah, no, I
But
agree that.
so Rainer, so I see you kind of based on what you've just shared with us, agreeing, tending to agree with what Nicole said, yeah? But the term is
yes,
ambiguous, and that is why it could be interpreted. So it's not that Daniel is even wrong, because when I see decent work, if it had said decent work environment, then all of what you've said would have been encapsulated in
yes.
work environment. But when you said decent work, you said similar, I think, to deviance, which is socially constructed. I
Mm-hmm.
could use the social framework to say decent work versus indecent work. Yeah, so it's just
Yeah,
the
Yeah,
ambiguity of the
yes.
like
right.
suppose I sold coke.
Agreed.
Is that decent work?
Suppose
It's
you
also
did what,
product.
Daniel?
Suppose I sold cocaine. Like, is that decent work? Like, I
Well,
can be
based on the ILO
productive.
definition, that wouldn't
You,
be because it's creating
that's
problems.
illegal work.
Oh, well, productive. I mean, I help the fin bros.
We
Kind
want
of
to be careful
do the
about the
magic on the
gray.
markets.
We want to be careful about the gray area that we create. But I understand. I agree with Daniel, but it's in the same breath. There's a continuum of sorts based on the definition of what we apply to decent, indecent, deviant. There are gonna be thresholds because when we get to a point where what you're doing is directly or indirectly or perhaps has that inherent capability of inducing harm on people, then we have to be very careful where harm
Yeah,
and the lack of benefit, therefore, even if there's no harm, the lack of obvious benefit is concerned.
exactly. All right. So very good arguments here. Excuse me. All right, I'm trying to, right. So establish strength universal comprehensive social protection policies that support a level of income. They're basically talking about safety netting. So that is why I put that little animation right there. Some amount of safety netting that support the level of income sufficient for healthy living for all. We touched on this inherent we touched on when we look at, the kind of standards that we want our persons or citizens or people to live the way we want our people to live. So I think this alludes to that universal comprehensive social protection or safety net here. And I speak of Jamaica, to which I'm most familiar. It's not very strong. We talk about the path, which is that flagship welfare benefit, which basically is almost nothing. when you think about the little bit of money that people get, you wonder how they survive on that, regardless of how many children they have. Some households, and each child gets, that minimum. It still is a little bit. Our governments are trying, but it really is menial. I don't know how to put it. But one suggestion here is to strengthen those social protection safety nets, and support a level of income sufficient for healthy living. Even with the increase, I just want us to just reflect a little bit. Even with the increase of the minimum wage in our different nation states, can people live a decent life, on the little bit? Or if they do, you wonder what they do to augment the little, because it's not much. And sometimes when I look at, say a single parent household, a man, whether the single parent is a man or a woman, and the little bit of money, how is it they make it stretch? I just don't know.
Some
But
would argue that a minimum wage is an evil concept in and of itself because it's literally saying that if it is that I could pay you less and it be legal, I would.
yeah. Oh, wow. I've never looked at it like that, Danielle. Wow. And that is
Marx would
why
talk about it as a living wage.
instead of minimum wage, you'd call it a living wage. That's what you say.
Yeah, that's the minimum amount of capital it is that I basically need to ensure that it is that labor continues.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so now you see where Hans and Engels and the, Marxist, um, arguments come from, in terms of the poor, the positive functions of being poor, eh? Build healthcare system based on principles of equity, disease prevention, and health promotion. Can we say there's some effort in this regard? Healthcare systems based on principle of equity. Where are we with that?
Free healthcare is always a great start.
I didn't get that one. I didn't hear what you said a while ago.
Oh, free healthcare is always a great start.
But it's a semblance of free healthcare.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Cindy, why are you hurting up my head here now? Cindy's saying in the chat, it is the same concept with the Cuban doctors and nurses in the Caribbean. Oh Lord, you've touched a sore point with me, Cindy. Um, hmm. Something, Cindy, take the mic and expound on what you've just written in the chat, if you may.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
As Daniel was saying, the difference between a living wage and a minimum wage. And we were talking about exploitation and workers, and then we were talking about equity and what is um appropriate work, that is.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have the issue now, the Caribbean issue with the Cuban doctors and nurses who have been like a pillar in our healthcare systems for as long as we could remember.
5 minutes. 5 minutes.
Recently, I think is Guyana came out and explained where they end their contract, but not to send them back, but to hire them personally, which I think personally was a good move because if you listen to some of these doctors, they would explain to you that they don't really get much money from being here. Everything mostly goes back to their government, and that is why there is in the contract that they're provided with living expenses, well, accommodations and transportation. But
Mm-hmm.
is it fair to them? Because they come and they work very hard, sometimes even harder than our own doctors. So where do we draw the line? Persons are saying if we're gonna take an approach where we're gonna go like Guyana and end that contract with the government and hire them as individuals, seeing them for their worth and their contribution, then that's another angle we could take. But as you said, as I would look at it, is that we have to tread lightly It's easy to say in a contract, but they're an integral part of our healthcare system. And in St. Vincent, I really don't think we have the capacity to function without them.
I tell you something, Cindy. When I heard, I was encouraged. So, like you said, Guyana mentioned that they would have employed them on an individual basis. When I heard about the discontinuation of that program, I'm sure I heard on the news that our government was saying that they would employ them, they would give them individual contracts. The last
They
thing I
did.
heard on the news, on one of those news, station, is that it's almost as if they're gonna be sent back home. They're
It's
all gonna
not
be,
sent back, it's Cuba pulling them.
oh, it's Cuba pulling them. And let me tell you, it pained my heart. And I've never felt so, it was just nauseating for me because I'm saying here we've had a kind of relationship with this country for so many years. They've done so much for our health system, for our school system, all of that. And for whatever reason, and I'm not getting political here, I'm just saying it will be a loss to us. It will be Cuba over the years has and continue to prove to be resilient. Yes, they face a lot of hardship, but for whatever reason, they keep surviving. They keep standing, and they will continue to stand. They'll continue to survive, and it is our loss. And not political or anything. I'm just saying it will be our loss, Cindy.
And they're integral in our education system and
I
educating
know,
citizens too.
I know.
So who is really gonna lose? Is it the Cubans or us? And when you work in a health center where four, say 4 or 5 doctors are Cubans,
Yeah,
then
and plus the nurses, don't forget the
and
nurses.
the nurses. Well, we don't have much nurses here, but we have a few, but the doctors overpower the Cuban population.
It,
So,
it it's gonna be hard on us.
and they're integrating providing scholarships, continuing education,
Listen,
university education.
listen, I have
Um,
family members who benefited from the medical program in Cuba. Yeah. So I tell you, it's a sore point that runs deep.
but I
I
think, as I say, politics is everywhere, as Wasim said in the chat. But hopefully we could have diplomatic, you know,
dialogue and sort
dialogue.
it out.
Is
Yeah.
one of the reasons that I mentioned that second part about power and
Yes.
money. The truth is that those with the power will always determine the outcome for most people. And when it comes to money, based on how the world is skewed, it is skewed so that those who already have money will get more money. And those who are already poor, it's almost like a phenomenon. We have to interview them. We ask them all these questions. But how did you transition from being poor to being this person? Because it's almost as if wherever you were born, you're supposed relegated to stay there. And so we have to
Yeah.
look at how we're going to re-engineer society so that if the poorest man in Jamaica's child has the ability to become which whatever, he ought to become that person because the society identify his unique gifts and will give him the support to get there.
But in all honesty, though, in all fairness, though, Nicole, in that regard, I don't know about you, but I can say in Jamaica, if a child has a potential like that, I'm not so sure that child's future is stymied. I don't know. In Jamaica, I tend to see where no matter how humble a beginning that child is from, there's always some resource out there to help that child if the child has the aptitude. Yeah.
And
That is
So
not the case and not my experience. There are many,
Oh,
many, especially if you work in
Same here,
primary health
Nicole.
care.
In primary care, you see
When you
them.
work in primary health care and you're
yeah,
really at the community level and you see the extremes kinds of poverty and how
right.
people almost just can't move, can't, and then you also interact with the social services that you are almost like begging them to put somebody on path.
And that could
When
be a
you see the
common.
patients who say to you, I've had patients wait 3, 4 years to have somebody from path come and do the inspection at their home.
Yeah.
A patient says to you his spouse died, he has a 14-year-old that has not been to school in 3 years. So something is wrong with what we're doing. If there's a 14-year-old who was
So
enrolled in school who
something
has
is wrong.
not been there for 3 years and nobody knows that this child is missing.
Mm,
So
Uh,
yes, there are, and the stories are there. They overwhelm you daily.
yeah. Um, So we can understand, therefore, I'm not discounting. I believe you, Nicole, because even when I enact my role as social worker and I write letters to PATH and these agencies, many a times persons come back and say to me, I haven't gotten through and I know they are in need. So what I do is I write another letter just to just reinforce the dire need that this person is in and to just ask them for a review. Yeah, I have had many successes, but sometimes some of the most needy, as I said, Nicole, um, doesn't get the help that he or she needs. But you see, and this is where advocacy comes in. You can help to advocate on behalf of, write that letter, write that strong letter, give it to them and say, take it, pick up well, again, I said time as a resource you won't have. Hopefully you work, um, you network closely with, say, a social worker who is out there on the ground doing these things, making sure, agitating on behalf of the less fortunate and the dispossessed in society.
But
Yeah.
I can say it from both side of the coins from what Miss Harrison is saying in terms of individualism and your attitudes and outlook and approaches on life. Because I will always use myself growing up in a single mother household, moving from era to era. Situations were not always the best, but I in my mind early on had a goal that I set for myself that I never allowed anybody to kind of deter me going to work evenings after school when my friends hang out, different things that, living in Galvanize and Pallet House, all kind of different things. So it's the mindset of the individual, but not everyone has that
Resilience.
strong personality or perseverance. And sometimes you're so happy for these persons along the way that would have given you an encouraging word, whether it be a teacher, whether
Right.
it be an aunt or somebody would always encourage you, to try and make that difference. And I was fortunate enough, I had an aunt that pulled me into church, in the Seventh Adventist church, and through, the Adventist youths and other things, it kind of refocused my mindset. But then
Right.
I could see from Nicole's point of view where I work in primary health care as well. And sometimes when we go out into the community, we are appalled. I am appalled with the level of poverty that would still exist. Because, most days we're in our little corner and we're thinking,
Yeah.
you know, things not so bad. But then when you go out there and you realize the level of poverty that is still there, the way some people still live, it sometimes it humbles you and it brings tears to your eyes. And that is why during, like adolescent groups and like one-on-ones with teenage persons that are teenage pregnancy. And so I try to encourage and let them know that, your situation does not determine your outcome. Because here I am today doing a master's degree with just basically the help of God and whoever. So, those little support system along the way. And I'm grateful for that. But there's persons who would still never get that opportunity. So would we
Yeah.
be able to go back to the first questions where are we able to break those barriers? Would we ever be able to do that? When we talk about equity and affordability and leveling the playing field. So I don't think in life the playing field would ever be leveled. But as I think it's Akeem or Daniel had said before, we could try to make it accessible.
Yes, right. Thank you so much for that, Cindy. I'm here and I'm thinking, each life that we touch, each person's life. I don't know about you, but I'm a woman of faith, and I think that, the Bible says, we are the fruits of this earth. And when you plant a seed into somebody's life, when that multiplies, you might not even recognize, you might not even see and know, you know, how it multiplied to others. So in our own little way, incrementally, and well, not incrementally, but in our own little individual way, what we do, the good we do, that seed we plant. And for me, the epitome of empowerment is when you help that, when consciousness is raised, when you help that person understand those obstacles that's in his way, in her way, and help that person to see how he or she can surmount, those obstacles. Growth would have taken place. Sometimes we don't have to give them, tangibly, but just that seed that you plant, having them that facilitation of empowerment where they think they can do, they know they can do, and you're instilling them that sense of efficacy. Trust me, I feel that, you'd have done so much more than just hand them $1 or something. Right. Thank you so much again for that. We're winding down. We're coming to the close of our session. So, of course, workforce capabilities to act on social determinants. This class is testimony to building a workforce with expanded capabilities to act on social determinants. And moving right along now to look at, come on, no. What it's saying here, ensure that routine monitoring systems are in place, for health equity, social determinants of health in places locally, national, international. We know the public health practitioners are out there doing surveillance, doing, this and that as part of the monitoring system, doing research and stuff. So all of these things are not just monitoring, but investigating and coming up with answers and whether it whatever correlates or relates to a particular phenomenon in terms of public health. And so I think these things are being done. So we have just a couple slides leave here and now. Here we are looking at, come on, slide, yes. So invest in generating and share new evidence on the ways in which social determinants influence population health and health equity. And that is why I feel that the program that you are enrolled in is so comprehensive. The epidemiology, the research methods that you have to partake in, the biostatistics and all of that. All these things are preparing you to go out there and generate those new evidence, eh? So you can talk about prevalence and incidence and so on and so forth, and you do those research and put it out there. Don't just have it on the shelves. Don't just say, yay, I did a research and that's it. I say to students, especially master students, sometimes the kind of presentations that you come up with, publish them, please. It's not so hard. Write an article in the newspaper, best practices, not so good practices, all of that. People learn from these things. And in closing, herein lies a challenge, according to this man, Fush. I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name correctly. He reminds us that some health outcomes may vary as a result of the interaction between two or more determinants. For example, he says, a given diagnosis, the appropriate choice between treatment with surgery or medication might depend on the social condition of that patient. The choice between treatment, surgery, or medication might depend on what? It could be finances. It could be, anything psychosocial right there. Similarly, the best policy choices of public health intervention might depend on social determinants of the target population. So when you go in whole communities and you want to, do an intervention in the community, it depends on how those persons receive you. Earlier, Raynor spoke about the lack of trust between community members. That too could be a social determinant as to how you intervene in the community. They might not want to because they don't trust you. And one of the deterrents to that trust could be who you speak to first, who your gatekeeper is. Sometimes communities are divided, in factions along political lines. And if you go in to that community, you want to do an intervention, and the first person you approach is a gatekeeper from one faction, the other faction don't want to talk to you because they think you're aligned with that party or not. Little things, simple things like that. Yes. So, of course, in all these things, in what we do, there are challenges. And these are some of my references right here. No, no group assignment. You've gotten it already. So, class, thank you so much for your participation. I think we've ended right on time. A minute past. God be with you until we meet again next week. We will meet. All right. So it is
Thank you very much. Good night.
Take care. Take care, everybody.
all the best.
Good night, everyone.